Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more of the Great War. This time we're on to week 90. Just what? Over 100 more weeks? Really, we don't have 200 more weeks still to go. I don't know how many weeks in total there are. Around 200? Let's see, 52 times 4. Rounding up, I think. About 220-ish weeks, 222 and 208 weeks. I think 52 times 4 would be 208. I'm gonna round up a little bit. Say we got 210 to 212. There's so much left to do. There is so much. We're not at the halfway point, but we've been doing this for over a year now. How long have I been doing it consistently, though? That's not sure. I know in total this is going to take about 2 years to do based on the speed at which I'm currently. Anyways, the meat grinder at Verdun, Brusilov's new plan. Great War Week 90. Before we dive in, though, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay, the rambling is over. Let's dive in.
What do you do if you launch an attack and lose?
Hold on, my audio is not working. I figured it out. I'm just stupid. Didn't turn up my speakers. On my end. Not on YouTube's end. My physical speakers that I have right next to me. I didn't have them dialed up enough. Oh god, I am too tired.
What do you do if you launch an attack and lose over 100,000 men while the enemy loses fewer than 20,000?
Do it again. Because we are the Italians.
Well, if you're Russia and it's 1916...
Or you're the Italians at the something pass. I forget what the battle is called.
You plan an even bigger attack.
Damn right, bigger is better.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War.
Woo.
Last week saw Zeppelins bombing England all week long.
Not woo.
Airplanes dropping bombs at Salonika.
Also
Further
not
Russian
woo.
advances in Anatolia, small German gains at the seemingly endless Battle of Verdun, and a British failure to advance far enough in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, British failure. You know what else the British failed at? Beating the USA at their own game. Come on. It's fucking soccer now, bitches. You haven't beaten us in a World Cup, and that's your fucking game. Us Americans, that's like the 7th most popular game in the whole United States. If we were as obsessed with soccer as we are with our football and our baseball and our basketball, goddamn, we would decimate. We would be unbeatable. Okay? Okay? Take that, Britain. Suck it. You suck. You can't beat... You couldn't beat the USA at a game of soccer. How does that feel? It must feel pretty bad, don't it? You haven't beaten us once. We've beaten you at the World Cup before, I believe. And then the other time, like there've been what, 3 times, and this was the 3rd time we've played at the World Cup. First time USA won. Second time a tie. That was like what, 2010. And now this time another tie. Damn, you suck, Britain. Or well, England, because it's not the team of the United Kingdom, because Wales has its own team. You're totally united, aren't you? You're a totally United Kingdom, huh? Maybe you should let Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland be free at this point. It's not going well for you, my guy.
They hadn't stopped trying. They were the British and Indian troops under Lieutenant General George Gorringe, who were trying to rescue their comrades under General Charles Townsend.
That was a really long tangent on a sport that I don't even watch or care about.
Who had been under
I don't care about any sports.
siege at Kut al-Amara on the Tigris River since early December, and it was not going well. On the morning of April 9th, the British tried a dawn attack on Saniyat, but it failed. On the 12th, though, the Turkish right was forced back 2 kilometers, and Gorringe's men made advances on the other side of the river 2 days later. Thing is, no matter how successful or unsuccessful they were, the British inevitably took casualties. And unlike the Ottomans, close to Baghdad, they could not replace their losses. In addition, the floodwaters that appear in the Tigris every spring meant that the fighting forces were hemmed in to narrow strips of land where frontal assaults were the only possible tactic. And since there was pretty much no cover of any kind, such assaults were suicide. Second Lieutenant Cuthbert Aston had this to say: "We have superiority of guns and numbers, and it's just these infernal machine guns that make one man as good as a battalion on this level, coverless country. If it weren't for those damn machine guns, we'd be in Kut now." But they weren't, and the men trapped in Kut were at the point of starvation. How much longer could they hold out? Frontal assaults against machine guns,
if it were me, I'd have given up.
weren't working anywhere else either. Certainly not on the northeastern front, where the Battle of Lake Narok finally came to an end this week. This battle was a huge disaster for the Russians, with their losses, as I said, reported at over 110,000, compared to just 20,000 for the Germans. And 12,000 of the Russian losses had been to frostbite. And all the ground that the Russians had initially taken had been retaken by the Germans. Clearly, something had to be done, because the Russian advantage in men would not last forever at that rate of attrition. And it was General Alexei Brusilov who figured he was the man to do it. On the 14th, he put forward his plan to the Stavka for a massive summer offensive. The offensive would take place in Galicia, primarily against the Austro-Hungarian forces,
which are the weaker. Why haven't they been focusing their efforts on the Austro-Hungarian army in the first place? Because that is clearly the weaker army. Like, I mean, I guess it's more mountainous down here, which good reason not to attack that. But still,
the goal would be to take some pressure off of Britain and France on the Western Front. Take a lot.
How does focusing on the Austrian Hungarians take pressure off of Britain and France in the West when the British and France are only fighting the German forces? What?
A lot of pressure off of Italy, and hopefully knock Austria-Hungary out of.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. Still don't know how that benefits France and Britain, though, because they are, again, only fighting Germany. Because if the Austro-Hungarians are knocked out of the war, then Italy is not going to have a front line to Germany, so ultimately, that doesn't do anything.
Of the war.
All that would do is give the Russians better advantage over the Germans, and that they could focus more of their men solely on the Germans then. But again, this initial plan does not help the British and French. I fail to see how this relieves pressure on them initially. But for it to take pressure off of Britain and France effectively, you need so many other things to happen, Brusilov. You need the Italians to become competent and overwhelm the Austro-Hungarians as you relieve pressure off of Italy. And then you're going to need the Austro-Hungarians to collapse, to capitulate, and then you'll be left with the Germans. That is too much ifs. The biggest if there being, will the Italians be competent? And I can answer that for you right now. No, they won't.
And perhaps that would be the future mother of all.
Unless I'm misreading the battle plan there. Like, I understand it's a wide front attacking not just the Austro-Hungarian, but still. You're wanting to relieve pressure off of the British and French, you focus your efforts on the Germans, not on the Austro-Hungarians. What am I misunderstanding here?
All offensives. But the current mother of all offensives was in full swing on the Western Front at Verdun. By the beginning of this month, German Army Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn had realized that fighting a war of attrition at Verdun was going to expose his own forces to comparable losses to those of the French, and his optimism was fading. First, he tried a narrow offensive east of the Meuse, but it was stopped at the outer line of fortifications. Then he tried an offensive on the west bank, but it had come under fire from the heights of the Mort Homme and Côte 304 and failed as well. So the strategy now was to attack on the entire front, some 30 kilometers wide,
Genius.
and even hit Côte 304 and Mort Homme simultaneously. This kicked off on April 9th and lasted for 4 days. Torrential rains then came and pretty much halted all activity.
Oh, is that the horse's stomach?
For the rest of April.
Get this off my screen.
At first, it seemed like a German success. They reached what they thought was the top of the Mort Homme, only to find that it was just the north crest, and that the real summit was hundreds of meters away, out of reach. The fight for Mort Homme then became an artillery battle. I read in John Keegan's The First World War of an officer in the French 146th Regiment named Augustin Cochin, who spent 5 days, April 9th to 14th, in the Mort Homme trenches without seeing a single German. The last 2 days soaked in icy mud, under terrible bombardment without any shelter other than the narrowness of the trench. The Boche did not attack, naturally. It would have been too stupid. Result: I arrived there with 175 men. I returned with 34, several half mad, not replying any more when I spoke to them. A little note here: Eugen von Falkenhayn was chosen to lead the German attack on Mort Homme. He was the elder brother of the German Army Chief of Staff, Erich von Falkenhayn, and childhood tutor to the German Crown Prince. True story. And you may remember that little brother Erich was often criticized for his caution. Well, that caution seemed to run in the family. General Max von Gallwitz spoke of Eugen's slowness like this: "We shall be in Verdun at the earliest by 1920. The rains would last for 12 days, and during this time von Gallwitz was thinking about the next attempt on Côte 304. It would be purely artillery and would blast the French from the hill, and never before in history would such a concentration of firepower have been witnessed." Ideally, that would save some German lives, because this week, on the 11th, German losses since the beginning of the war are counted at 2,730,917.
Damn.
But how did the Allies look in general? As you no doubt have guessed, they had grown considerably since 1914.
Yeah.
Italy, the weakest industrially, had by now raised the number
And fucking militarily, let's be fucking real here.
of infantry battalions from 590 to 693. Its field artillery numbered over 2,000 pieces. The army in the actual combat zone had grown since 1915 from 1 million men to 1.5 million. Russia, in spite of suffering losses in almost unimaginable numbers in 1915, was back up to strength. By now, Russia had nearly 2 million men in the field, and they were also now properly equipped, which was not at all the case last year. Russian industry had expanded big time. Engineering output had increased by a factor of 4 since 1913. Chemical output had doubled. There had been a 2,000% increase in shell production and over 1,000% increase in rifle production. Actually, standard shells had been produced at a rate of 358,000 per month at the beginning of 1915. By the end of that year, it was nearly 5 times that, 1.5 million shells a month. This year, Russian heavy guns would be as well stocked as those of the Germans and the French.
Ooh.
And speaking of the French, 25 new infantry divisions had been added to the French army in the past year. The French army was now 25% stronger than it had been in 1914. That was nothing compared to the British, who had fielded only a small army back when the war broke out. By now, Britain had 70 divisions in service, 10 times as many as before the war. And here's one little, completely unrelated side note to end the week. Orthodox Easter was April 10th, and there were many truces on the Austrian front, with soldiers from 4 Russian regiments crossing to the Austrian lines to fraternize. The Austrians took them prisoner. Things like the Christmas truce 16 months ago were things
God, 16 months ago.
of the past. And that was the week. The Germans raining fire at Verdun, the Russians losing over 100,000 men in the north for no gains at all, but making plans to drastically alter the game, and the British desperate but still unable to break through on the Tigris. On this day, 100 years ago, April 14, 1916, Winston Churchill wrote from the trenches of the Western Front to his wife, "I greatly fear the general result. More than I have ever done before, I realize the stupendous nature of the task, and the unwisdom of which our affairs are conducted makes me almost despair at times of a victorious issue. Do you think we should succeed in an offensive if the Germans cannot do it at Verdun with all their skill and science? Our army is not the same as theirs, and of course, their staff is quite intact and taught by successful experiment. Our staff only represents the brain power of our poor little peacetime army, with which hardly any really able men would go. We are children at the game compared to them, and in this day-to-day trench warfare, they lose half what we do." This may have been true, but those children were now better armed and more numerous than ever and growing every day. And how long could the Germans keep up with that?
Indy literally just made the point that I was about to make in response to Churchill's quote there. Churchill is making an excellent point, right? So both of these things are actually correct in what I'm saying, what I believe I'm saying, and what Churchill said. The Germans are, yes, better equipped for war. They know how to wage war. They still have the brain power of the German unification of 1870. Now, it's not the same people, right? But essentially, the people that had been the brain power behind that taught the current people that are waging, the World War I in the German military. And I think, maybe a couple of them had been generals at the time of 1870. I don't know if they're old enough. Maybe they had been minor officers or something, but whatever, that doesn't matter. However, Germany, yes, while they do lose half of what the British and the French are losing in the day-to-day, as Churchill made mention of, sadly, well, that still isn't enough to swing it in the German favor. Now, of course, if the Germans were to go full defense and the British and French were to literally just throw men at them, then the French and British would be drained before the Germans are. But even at half of what the British and French are losing, that is still too many men for the Germans to really suffer. Now, of course, the French can't suffer casualties like that because they are, I believe at around this time period, they are of roughly equal population as the Germans. The British can pull troops from across the world to make up for their losses, which is something the Germans and French can't do. Germans and French essentially have to rely on their home population. The British don't. So, French and Germans will be out of people at this rate to fight the war, pretty much. So, the quote is accurate, but it also is like, yeah, even with them losing half, they're not going to be able to hold out for as long as, say, the British can. Don't even know the point of me saying that. Like, it doesn't really change anything, change perspectives or anything, but just a note. That was the meat grinder at Verdun. Brusilov's new plan, the Great War Week 90. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.